President Donald Trump can be unpredictable, and it looks like he's using his unpredictability to his advantage. Trump had many contradicting statements when it comes to foreign policy before. However, now he is using his power to have a massive shift when it comes to the United States foreign policy, at least when it comes to the latest moves that he's doing. The first move that he's done was to enforce a ceasefire in Gaza. When he sent his envoy, Steve Witkoff, to have a conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, telling him that all hell to pay threat was directed at Israel, not just Hamas. Now, when it comes to that threat, when it was launched, no one thought that Donald Trump meant Israel. Donald Trump, at the end of the day, he has dealings with profound Zionists. He made things in the favor of Israel before, and he continues to make statements that are in favor of Israel. However, his statements can have more than one interpretation. He's using that to his advantage, and he is clearly pushing for his own agenda. That is a massive shift from even his previous term as the United States president. Now, Steve Witkoff is saying that Trump directed him to get the Gaza ceasefire to the next phase. The same man who had a very unfriendly conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu and told him that all hell to pay, and that hell includes you, includes Israel, following which Benjamin Netanyahu immediately started taking steps to implement the ceasefire. And even when Israel wanted to have a delay, there was more pressure on them to adhere to the timeline that was dictated by the United States before Donald Trump's inauguration. And that indeed happened. And now he's sending Witkoff to ensure that things are going to continue to the second phase. But he's not only sending Witkoff to ensure things are happening, he's sending Witkoff to Gaza. Steve Witkoff said, I'm actually going to be over to Israel. I'm going to be part of an inspection team at the Netzarim corridor and also at the Philadelphia corridor. And I want to hold and speak about this point. I want to have a pause here and speak about this point. Firstly, there were reports that he might be visiting Gaza. One of the Hamas leaders previously invited him to visit and meet the Palestinian people. And now he is going to Gaza. And this report about him going to Gaza is underestimated, underreported, and also misread. The first reason why is the fact that by visiting Gaza, he will be putting legitimacy to the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. Steve Witkoff doesn't have to go to Gaza. All of this security team that they're sending to Gaza, firstly, it was coordinated with Hamas during the negotiations. Hamas previously said, no one will enter Gaza unless coordinated with us. So with the ceasefire negotiation talks, the American side agreed with the Palestinians to have a third-party presence temporarily during the first phase and then leave, of course, to make sure that Israel withdraws from Gaza and some of the Palestinian vehicles get checked, jointly with a company from Egypt that also has Qatari participation. Gaza, at the end of the day, is controlled by Hamas. Steve Witkoff going there is giving the Palestinian resistance legitimacy. They are the ones who are present there. They are the ones who are responsible for things over the ground, under the ground, security, policing, and everything to do with that. So the people he's going to be seeing there, they're going to be the Palestinian Authority of Gaza, which is led by Hamas. And that's something that he forced Israel to do, by the way. He forced his way there. Because Antony Blinken, when he was in Israel before, he asked to have a visit to the Gaza borders to ensure that aid was going in. And Israel at the time, they refused his request under the excuse of, we can't make sure you know that we can protect you. People are going to be protesting. And now Witkoff is going to be going inside of Gaza, not only in the Netzarim corridor, but also in the Philadelphia corridor. So he's going to be spending several hours inside of Gaza. hands-on, viewing the whole destruction. And that message is more of a message against Israel rather than any threat towards the Palestinian side, by the way. There is no intimidation for the Palestinian side. What they've faced in the past 15 months, this total destruction, this genocide, we're talking about a security team coordinated with Hamas and with the Palestinian side, going to do a job and get out. Steve Witkoff doesn't have to go there. And his excuse to be there, by the way, is not that valid too. An inspection. You don't have to go there to inspect. The people on the ground can go in and inspect at the end of the day. Witkoff is sending a message to Israel that there's a new phase. And he's going there to ensure that Israel goes through the next phases in the ceasefire. And this is resonating with the report of Donald Trump that if things don't go to the next phase, there's going to be problems. Donald Trump said things need to go to the next phase, otherwise there are going to be lots of problems. Who is that message to? The Gazans? They already lost everything, the people of Gaza, in terms of material stuff. They lost their houses, they lost everything they own. Of course, now there's more aid and everything. The things are, getting better in Gaza. But that threat is to Benjamin Netanyahu and to Israel. There's a big shift. Is this visit of Witkoff as well an answer to the offer that they got from Hamas, the invitation to go and visit Gaza too? Musa Abu Marzouk, a senior figure in Hamas, said they're ready to begin a dialogue with the United States directly. And he invited the United States representatives and officials to visit Gaza, to hear from the people, hands-on, directly, what their aspirations are, what they want. Could that be an answer? Steve Witkoff going there to Gaza? And it's not only with Gaza, by the way. Donald Trump is doing certain things in the United States internally that are bothering some people. He is removing security of Pompeo, the previous CIA director, and John Bolton, the previous national security advisor, and a main hawk of the warmongering Bush administration that Donald Trump criticized very much. And although he was close to him and he was a part of his previous administration, now he removed security of John Bolton. And John Bolton had a statement to make in that regard that I wanted to share with you. And then I wanted to share Donald Trump's reaction when it comes to John Bolton.
What's your reaction to Trump revoking your security detail, ending your Secret Service detail?
Well, I've had better days, that's for sure. This is, I think, typical of Trump the man. This is the kind of character or lack thereof who's now president. When President Biden, recognizing the threat against me and several other current and former U.S. government officials, authorized the Secret Service to restore protection, which I had when I was National Security Advisor, I'm sure he probably wasn't the happiest man in the world because of the criticisms that I've made of him on his foreign policy.
That was the beginning response of John Bolton. John Bolton, anyone who knows him, is a massive warmonger, a man with radical views. And he supported the war in Iraq heavily. He wants another war with Iran too. And this is the interesting thing, is that the statement that Donald Trump made when it comes to removing security and protection of John Bolton.
You take a job, you want to do a job. We're not going to have security on people for the rest of their lives. Why should we? I thought he was a very dumb person, but I used him well, because every time people saw me come into a meeting with John Bolton standing behind me, they thought that he'd attack them because he was a warmonger.
Deliberately as well, saying that the man was a warmonger. And these are indications that actually Donald Trump looks like he's going ahead with his plans to end wars. And again, there are things that might appear contradicting. For example, he's having these aggressive statements against Canada, Panama, Greenland. When it comes to Israel, he removed some of these settlers off the sanctions list in the United States. There are some reports about deals he might have in the West Bank, although none of that was declared really from his administration. However, the most important thing is what's happening on the ground. And on the ground, Donald Trump forced Israel to have a ceasefire. He's sending Steve Witkoff to Gaza, a massive message on its own, recognizing the Palestinian resistance, by the way. That's what Steve Witkoff's visit to Gaza is. And also, that same man who applied pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu and is having this aggressive tone with Israel that, again, is being underestimated, underreported, and misread, he is sending him to be the main person when it comes to Iran. Trump is appointing Steve Witkoff to be the main Iran person when it comes to the United States administration. This was reported in the American Conservative. They're calling it a continued shift. This move shows a continued shift in Trump's Iran strategy. And even when it comes to Iran, Donald Trump made several statements that he hopes that things don't escalate to a war with Iran, that I believe we can reach a deal with Iran. And even if we don't reach a deal with Iran, I guess that's okay. Some of his latest statements with Iran. Again, in opposition, contrary to previous assumptions, some of the previous statements that Donald Trump made before he came to power during his campaign. So clearly, now there is a shift when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, and this shift is focusing more on de-escalation from what we can see so far. The fact that he pushed for the ceasefire in Gaza, the fact that he's sending Steve Witkoff, the same man who forced this ceasefire upon Netanyahu, threatening him with hell, not Hamas, sending him to make sure that there's a phase two, and that there will be lots of problems, Trump saying, if we won't go ahead with phase two. This reconciliatory tone when it comes to Iran, de-escalation, and the fact that Witkoff is going to be the main person when it comes to Iran, all of these things are de-escalation. How else can anyone really describe them? And if the United States will finally start taking a role of really the peacemaker, Donald Trump declared that he wants to be remembered as the peacemaker. He promised to end all wars. Many people, casted doubt on that, compared them to other statements he made too. But now with these moves, they are very important, because if the United States indeed wants to end these wars, especially in Palestine, in the Levant, in West Asia, de-escalate with other countries too, they can do that, because the United States administration has been the biggest terrorist state administration on earth. Wars everywhere, warmongering, going against people's will, taking down democracies, a bullying approach. These things are very important, and they can indeed de-escalate things. Of course, not to a level where we all of a sudden have all-out solutions and everything. Well, no, that requires a lot of time and effort, not only from the United States administration, but the fact that the U.S. is the biggest supporter of the biggest terror state in West Asia, which is Israel. The fact that they are taking such measures are vital, are very important, because without U.S. support, without the Biden administration supporting Benjamin Netanyahu, continuously giving him the weapons that he wants and the money and the funding, the legitimacy when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, if Joe Biden did not do that, Benjamin Netanyahu couldn't have continued this war and genocide. Moving on to the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about. There has been a report in Israel that Iran is trying to get money into Lebanon through Turkey. Of course, big changes in Syria. Hezbollah no longer have the position they have in Syria, neither Iran. However, things were clearly coordinated to an extent between Turkey, Iran, Russia, and other countries too. And why is Israel saying Iran works to transfer funds to Lebanon, to Hezbollah in Lebanon through Turkey? It's because Israel is still present in Lebanon, and the Lebanese authorities are security checking diplomatic Iranian bags coming to Hezbollah. Now, how do they go about getting the money, transferring the money, for example, to Hezbollah without raising eyebrows? And here we have the answer: Turkey. And this report came in Israel, according to foreign intelligence sources, that Iranian diplomats are using Turkey to channel money to Hezbollah. And at the end of the day, if they're going to channel money to Hezbollah through Turkey, nothing can happen. But what do we understand from that? We understand a couple of things. Number one, Turkey and Lebanon, they have very good relations. Turkey and Iran have very good relations too, although they are technically competitors. They are at a competition, like with regional dominance. But that competition hasn't really affected their long-standing relationships. The relationship between Turkey and Iran is not like, for example, the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Some of the Arab states that have dealings with Iran, they deal with Iran in a very amateur way, with a lot of prejudice as well. Now, of course, prejudice exists in all parts of the world, but between Turkey and Iran, things are dealt with at a more mature level. So despite them having, for example, massive disagreements in Syria, them supporting opposing sides of the conflict, having people killed on both sides, they managed to reach an understanding. And of course, now Turkey is the bigger influencer inside of Syria, not Iran, but they're continuing their coordination. That coordination is moving on to Lebanon with Turkish knowledge. Turkey knows where this money is intended to. If it's done by diplomats from Iran, they know exactly what's happening, and it's done with coordination. This indicates that coordination that happened between Turkey, Iran, and Russia following the massive changes in Syria and the collapse of the Assad regime is continuing now, even when it comes to Hezbollah. Which leads us to Hezbollah and the ceasefire, and a change of tone is being noticed when it comes to Hezbollah. There were comments coming from Hezbollah top figures before that on day 61, if Israel remains in South Lebanon, then it wouldn't be like the 60th day. There was an escalatory tone from Hezbollah about Israeli presence. However, now we're very close to the deadline of the 60 days. In 3-4 days' time, we'll have 60 days, and Israel must be completely out of Lebanon. Hezbollah made a statement. And it was released on their main media website. Their statement said, some leaks that talks about the enemy postponing its withdrawal and staying longer in Lebanon require everyone, especially the political authority in Lebanon, by pressuring countries sponsoring the agreement to move effectively and keep up with the last days of the deadline in a way that ensures implementation of the full withdrawal and deployment of the Lebanese army to the last inch of Lebanese territory and the return of the residents to their villages quickly, and not to allow any pretexts or arguments to prolong the occupation. They added, while we follow the developments of the situation that is supposed to culminate in the coming days with a complete withdrawal, any breach of the agreement and pledges and any attempt to evade them under flimsy titles will not be acceptable. And they finally called for strict commitment that does not accept any concessions. There is no direct confirmation from Hezbollah that they will be restarting the war. What do we understand from that? Has Hezbollah taken a step back? Were they hit that bad that they cannot continue to fight Israel? Has there been a massive deal? I believe that the situation is very simple and straightforward. Hezbollah are saying that certain diplomatic objectives can be achieved without the continuation of the war. There was a ceasefire that has been breached many times by Israel, but altogether it's a ceasefire at the end of the day that Hezbollah adhered to and respected. There's a ceasefire now in Gaza. There's a new administration in the United States that is applying pressure on Israel. If they're seeing that things can de-escalate without them going ahead and opening an all-out front on Israel again, then they would prefer that way. Because if you can achieve your objectives without war, it's better than for you going without war. The best way of achieving your objectives is without firing a bullet. Israel, they withdrew the majority of the forces from Lebanon before, but now they still have presence. They still need to retreat. They still need to withdraw the rest of them. In Gaza, they withdrew brigades that were there from the beginning of the war, and the ceasefire agreement confirms that Israel has to withdraw from every inch of Gaza, including the buffer zone. All of that, well, after continued war and bombardment, it's a massive loss and humiliation for Israel, but without restarting the war. So Hezbollah could be seeing all of that and saying, yeah, we'd rather wait, and potentially, again, this is potentially, giving Israel a bit more time. This is what I understand from this statement from Hezbollah. The fact that they're not having a very fierce statement, an ultimatum that either leave or, indicates that they might be open for another delay. That's not in line with what they said before, by the way. However, that might be coming as an understanding between them, the Iranian side, the American side too. Why are they giving Israel all of that time? Well, that's a different story. There are multiple points that Hezbollah are considering now in Lebanon. Number one, the big changes that happened in Syria. Number two, the fact that internally there are certain people inside of Lebanon who oppose Hezbollah completely, and they want an excuse to take down the whole movement. Number three, recovering from some of the blows that they got during this war, despite the fact that they show that they can hit Israel up until the last day when it comes to the war with Israel. On the final day of their activities against Israel, they targeted Tel Aviv with approximately 500 projectiles, Tel Aviv in the northern part of Israel as well. And they're seeing that if there can be a route, even if we have a limited extension, we would prefer that way than to engage in war immediately. Again, that's an assumption. We might have day 61 coming in and Hezbollah taking a different approach. They might actually be implementing the things they said before this statement, which is day 61 will be completely different than day 60. So far, they breached this agreement, the ceasefire agreement, only once, whereas Israel breached it, some reports say, over 1,000 times. They tried to send a message to Israel, a message that clearly wasn't enough, by having a very minor attack on the Shib'a farms at the time. Will they have an all-out attack on Israel on day 61? From that statement, it's looking unlikely. The question is, if they will have, and there's most likely a lot of attempts now happening between everyone in Lebanon, the US administration as well, to try and de-escalate and force Israel to withdraw, because Hezbollah are also seeing that the United States administration is having these successes when it comes to the ceasefire in Gaza, which was more important, by the way, for Israel in terms of like the war, the genocide in Gaza. It was more pressing on Israel than the Lebanese front. They're seeing an administration, if they're having these successes in Gaza, they might think they can actually, they can actually impose something on Israel when it comes to Lebanon too. Because if the Trump administration wants to de-escalate and they're actually looking for peace, then we might use that to our advantage. And look, for example, American administration, we'll give you 2 more weeks, but no more than that, because if 2 more weeks, for example, or a month, and Israel doesn't retreat, then we will, of course, have to start attacking Israel. That's something that would potentially press. That's if the United States administration is not taking actions now, by the way. But that could be a move coming from Hezbollah to test the US administration when it comes to the Lebanese front. Because when it comes to Lebanon, there are other players too. There's the French, there are some of the Arab countries too who have a lot of influence in Lebanon. But when the day comes, day 61, we will see whether Hezbollah indeed give more time and tell the state, look, you wanted responsibility, here you have the responsibility, go and deal with them, and wait to see if something can happen when it comes to US pressure on Israel, or take the matter into their own hands again and start attacking Israel again up until they enforce a ceasefire with more leverage to the Lebanese side and more destruction happening in Israel. That could come at cost also to Lebanon too, but after 15 months of this ongoing war in Gaza and in Lebanon too, other fronts as well, it appears that most sides want to de-escalate rather than escalate.